It's St. George's Day next week, and that's the English National Day. Not that you would know it, because we don't tend to celebrate it. I don't know anyone who has a party. Unlike the Scottish and the Irish and the Welsh, they really know how to go for it. We don't. Anyway, so it's the English National Day, 23rd of April. And I thought I'd find out, who was this guy? Who was George? Where did he come from? How did he become the patron saint of England, even though he never came here? What was all that stuff to do with dragons? And let's see what we can do. See if I can unpack that for you right now. So let's get going. Right from the start, it's worth saying there is no historical evidence whatsoever that St. George even lived. Now, that's not surprising, and that doesn't mean he didn't live. It just means that there isn't any evidence to prove that he did live. And what I'm going to share with you is going to come extensively from the Roman writings of the year in Latin and from the Greek writings of the time. St. George, or if I just call him George at the moment because he wasn't St. George at that time, was born in around about the year 250 AD. So about 250 years after Jesus himself. And he was born a Christian to Greek parents living in a place called Cappadocia. At the time it was Greece, now it's Turkey. Now, Cappadocia is an amazing place. If you get a chance, go. It's definitely one to put on your list. It has, amongst other things, mountains upon mountains in this area. Anatolia is the area. And they're in the mountains, high up in the mountains. You'll find cave after cave, interwoven into lots of different caves where lots of Christians were gathering, and they were living in these caves, partly because it's so much safer to live high up on a cliff edge where you have to climb up with a rope so that nobody can attack you, because you can pull the rope up or the ropes up. It's very hard for them to attack you and very easy to defend. So this was part of the early Christian movement. There's even letters in the New Testament to the Cappadocians. You can look that up if you so wish. And so that is where George was born. And at a fairly young age, under 10 years old, his parents moved to Palestine, to what is now about 15 kilometers outside of Tel Aviv. And there, as he grew up, he was enlisted into the Roman Empire as a soldier and progressed through the ranks, became a horseman. And during all of those formative years, he became apparently a very good fighter. And he would have toured much of the Roman Empire, particularly North Africa. So we're talking Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, current day. Not sure what they were all called back then. And so he will have travelled along those areas. But he is really known for how he went to his death, because this was a really tricky time to be a Christian. What a conflict of interest. In those days, the Romans would kill Christians for fun. They call it persecuting. They would abduct them. They would take them as slaves. They would beat them. They would throw them to the lions in the Colosseum. They would throw them to the gladiators in the Colosseum. And so it wasn't a good time. No, it wasn't a good time. It wasn't an easy time to be a Christian. But his comrades, his peers, his superiors were getting more and more fed up with him. And he apparently, so the stories go, was warned upon warning not to protest against the persecution of the Christians. However, he didn't stop, and eventually they got fed up and they decided, they gave the order that he was to be killed himself, executed. And this is how he became so famous. It's how he went to his death, because he was part of this new Christian movement where they believed that they were going to go to heaven if they died. And so even though he was tortured and eventually decapitated, they cut his head off, he went to that peacefully without protest. And apparently thousands upon thousands of people converted to Christianity because of how he went to his death. Even the emperor's wife converted to Christianity. Unfortunately for her, he had her executed also. So that is what St. George is all about. That's how he became canonized and became a saint. But over about 1,000 years, the stories built up and built up and built up. And to about the 11th, 12th, 13th centuries, these stories became so that he was not just a fighter in the Roman Empire, but that he freed a village in what is now Libya from this raging dragon that lived in the lake. They'd been feeding this dragon sheep and goat every day for a long time, had a ferocious appetite, until they'd run out of sheep, run out of goats, and the only thing was to start feeding it their children. And the story goes that each family had to provide on a rota basis a child to feed the dragon, otherwise it would eat all of them. And it had come round just at the time that George had arrived in this town, where the mayor, the king, the leader, not quite sure what to call him, was having to give his daughter to feed the dragon. This is where George stepped in and killed the dragon. As I said, this story was created more than 1,000 years after St. George was supposedly living. So that's that story. But during the Middle Ages, we had the Knights Templar. You probably recognise them as the guys with the big metal helmets and metal chain mail, a white shirt with a red cross. George would never have had that. St. George would never have that. He was a Roman soldier. He would have been wearing Roman soldiers. But that's what the Knights Templar were wearing when they were going off on their crusades to try and save Christianity from this new religion of the Muslims, of Islam. It was Henry VIII in the year 1415, after the Battle of Agincourt. Henry VIII that created a feast for St. George, really for his soldiers. And this was to be an annual event, which then became a national event where it spread beyond that. And so that, my friends, is the story of St. George. It is also worth noting that he's not just the patron saint of England, Georgia, no surprise there, in Eastern Europe, Portugal, many cities. Well, and there was a nation, Venice used to be a nation. So Venice, Genoa, many cities have got St. George as their patron saint. So that's about it. I hope you've enjoyed it.